This week on The Record, a week of inaugurations, new members swearing the oath of office at the St. Louis County Council and in state houses in Illinois and Missouri. Plus, council wars take a dramatic turn, why Sam Page calls the push to create powers to expel him is bad government. Could it be good politics? And a new prosecutor in St. Louis County. We go one-on-one with Melissa Price Smith during her first days on the job. It's all coming up right now. Welcome to The Record. I'm Mark Maxwell. St. Louis County has a new prosecuting attorney, Melissa Price Smith, swearing the oath of office just more than a week ago. Governor Mike Parson picked the Democrat, backed by police unions, after a contentious legal battle over who gets to appoint that position. She's also entering the office as clashes continue inside county government. I sat down with her at her office just days after starting the new job. Congratulations again on the appointment and the confirmation from the courts. To anyone in St. Louis County who might be wondering, who is Melissa Price Smith? How'd you get here?
I'm a career prosecutor. I am meant to be a prosecutor. I'm inspired by what I do. For the last 20 years, I wake up every morning because of the work I do with victims. I'm a prosecutor. I'm not a politician. I've grown up in this office, and I intend to really make this office stronger. St. Louis County deserves a strong prosecutor's office, and I intend to work in partnership with law enforcement to hold violent offenders accountable and give victims a voice and help them find justice.
You're speaking a lot about your experience. A lot of that experience was spent investigating and prosecuting sex crimes. I can't imagine how the things you must have seen, the grisly crimes and the victims in a vulnerable position. I can't imagine how all of that must have shaped your perspective.
I've worked in nearly every area of this office, starting in misdemeanors. I've done guns and drugs, property crimes, robberies, burglaries, homicide, but for the vast majority of the last years, I've done sexual assault and child abuse. I've seen some of the worst, but it's also been my honor to work with some of the bravest people I've ever met, and I'm talking about the victims in these cases, and they inspire me. And that's why I feel so strongly about our sexual assault, child abuse team here, as well as our domestic violence team, which are very, very strong teams and will continue to be under my leadership.
You're using language like strong prosecution. It sounds similar to tough on crime. You put 100 lawyers in a room, you get 100 different opinions, right? So I understand there's always disagreement sometimes in debate internally. What's your philosophy on prosecutorial discretion, when to charge, when not to charge? How should we think about the way you approach these delicate decisions?
Well, every case is an individual case, and every defendant is a person, every victim is a person, so prosecutorial discretion is extremely important. Yes, I want a strong prosecutor's office because I know St. Louis County deserves it, and we need to be tough on crime and violent offenders. However, I also feel very strongly about our treatment courts. Treatment courts give nonviolent offenders a second chance. Treatment courts give them an opportunity to get help and really to change the trajectory of their lives. Speaking honestly, and I've said this before, if treatment courts, particularly drug court, had been around 40 years ago, my own brother might be alive today. So I'm very aware that these courts are an integral part of our system, and prosecutorial discretion is very important in determining who deserves a second chance, who can be helped with treatment and support.
I'm sorry to hear about your brother's passing. I didn't know about that. Is there anything about that you'd like to elaborate on? I don't know how old you were when...
Actually, my brother passed 2 years ago. He was in a motorcycle accident about 40 years ago. However, prior to that, he had a very serious drug problem. And to be quite honest, he was in trouble with the law all the time. So I will tell you, I'm a prosecutor. I also know how it feels to be in a family on the other side. I get it. I get both sides of it, and every case is individual.
That's an interesting example that you raised, because I don't know if you see yourself as someone who defends a prosecutor's office or someone who wants to reform it. I'll ask the question this way. People who are accused of crimes, that's a big interruption to their life. they can lose a job. They can spend time, if they can't afford to pay bail, they can spend a lot of time in jail waiting for their trial. How do you think about that question? Is the use of cash bail appropriate? Is it a practice that you're going to use to the full extent? Or is that something where some reformers of a criminal justice system might want to say, we want to use that less and rely instead on other means to make sure someone appears in court for their trial?
Well, again, it's a case-by-case basis, and I've been a prosecutor for a long time. There are some offenders, particularly violent offenders, who should have a high cash bail. St. Louis County deserves that, or request no bail at all. I have been talking about a violent crime unit and reinstating our violent crime unit, which had been suspended several months ago. I reinstated that unit this past Friday. We have a strong veteran prosecutor who's running it, and he will have other attorneys working with him. The goal of the violent crime unit is they will be on call 24/7 to work with law enforcement so they can review and issue charges of this violent nature without delay. The other issue we have with violent offenders is these are also often the offenders who are repeat offenders. These are the people who need to be off the streets and kept off the streets.
And bail is a tool to do that?
Bail is absolutely a tool to do that. There are other means in other cases. In the cases of violent offenders, whatever means we have, they need to be kept off the streets.
You say you're reinstating the violent crime unit. Do you also plan to keep in place the special unit charged with investigating crimes involving police officers?
Absolutely. Our walled-off unit will stay in place in crimes investigating police officers. Absolutely, that will stay in place, and that is run by one of our attorneys, Jessica Hathaway, who is a very strong prosecutor, and she'll continue doing that work as well. We'll also continue our sexual assault child abuse unit, our domestic violence unit, and we are in the process of starting a homicide unit, which should be up and running in about 2 weeks. And again, that will be a specialized unit similar to the sexual assault and domestic violence unit, where those attorneys can work specifically and focus on homicide crimes.
How is a homicide unit different than a violent crime unit, and will either one of those work in tandem with the feds?
Well, first of all, our office is always open to working with the feds. As I've been a prosecutor for many years, on several cases, I will get calls from the feds. They will sometime have cases pending at the same time. They will sometime come in and take a case that we have to their jurisdiction. So our office will always work in tandem with the feds. In terms of your question about violent crimes being different than homicides, well, obviously there's homicides, but in St. Louis County there's also a lot of violent offenders that are not charged with a homicide or a murder.
So I guess the way to ask the question more precisely is, will the violent crimes unit only be investigating crimes that are not homicides, that are violent?
Yes, they will, and the homicide unit will specifically look and handle homicides. They will also likely handle other cases in the office. But because of St. Louis County is so large, St. Louis County deserves specified units who can handle specific crimes and have expertise.
All of this sounds like a lot. Does this require more manpower?
Well, first of all, I would never say no to more manpower. However, it is important that we can work with the resources that we have. We have some incredible people in this office. And I think if we can reallocate our resources, our people, I want to hear from every person in this office because we all share a similar passion to find justice. But with the resources we have and a reallocation of those resources, we can also do these things, these goals that I've spoken to you about, with what we have. Yes, I'd welcome more attorneys, more staff, but we can do this with what we have.
You're coming to this position at an interesting time of transition in St. Louis County. What will be the legacy of Wesley Bell in this office?
Wesley Bell was a good leader. Everybody liked him here, and I intend to build on the things that he did here in the office. I wish him the best of luck in Congress. I think he'll be great.
You had a lot of experience here, including during his predecessor,
Correct.
Bob McCullough. How were they different?
I was hired by Bob McCullough about 17 years ago. Bob McCullough was a little bit more law and order. Wesley Bell was a little bit more reform. I have learned from both of them, and I plan on moving forward with what I've learned from both of them and make this a strong office and pursue the goals that I've already mentioned while talking to you.
Do you fashion yourself more of a Bob McCullough disciple, Wesley Bell, your own person? Where do you fit in this spectrum between law and order and reform?
I think I'm a little bit of both. However, I will tell you, I intend to rebuild our relationship with law enforcement, rebuild our relationship with the judiciary, as well as defense counsel. It's important that we all work very closely together because that's the only way this justice system works.
You mentioned that you're not a politician, but there was a pretty heated political moment when you were first appointed and talking before the county council where you leveled quite a charge. You said that someone close to Sam Page asked you to dig up dirt on a council member. Which council member?
Well, first of all, I don't think it was me leveling quite a charge. I was answering a question honestly. And I will tell you, as long as I am in this position in this office, I will always answer questions honestly, whether it's good or bad.
I appreciate that as a journalist.
Yeah, I answered a question at the county council, to be quite honest, which I would have preferred had been asked in private. However, I was asked a question at the county council regarding what I had been asked to do, and I answered it honestly. I was asked to find dirt on Mike Archer. I answered that question honestly. I was not doing with the intent to level charges against anybody. But like I said, I will always answer questions honestly.
You say with the intent to level charges. Do you think that the ask itself was improper or crossed some other line?
Do I think the ask of the county council or of the person?
Pardon, the ask to dig up dirt. Was that request improper or did it cross a line even farther than just improper?
I think it was absolutely improper. Yes, I do. I was in the interview process of trying to get the position of prosecutor. I don't think I had been asked to get dirt on someone who was running for office.
And you said at the time that you didn't recall who made that request. That's hard for me to believe because I feel like if I was gunning for this big job or hoping that maybe I'd get this job and someone approached me with a question like that, I'd have a pretty clear memory of it.
I have a very clear memory of it, and I'm not going to disclose the name.
You were protecting the person's name?
I'm not going to disclose that person. I don't think that's relevant here. I have a very clear memory of what happened.
As you're probably aware, the county council is now pushing to create powers to expel the county executive, Sam Page. Is it proper for the county prosecutor to use your discretion, your investigatory tools to use the quo warranto proceedings to expel a public official?
I am focused on the work here in the prosecutor's office, and that's what I will continue to do. I think what you're asking about is probably the quo warranto regarding Dennis Hancock, which I'm not able to speak about specifically because it's currently pending in the office.
Sure.
However, I will tell you it is being very closely looked at, and there's no room for politics or drama in the prosecutor's office.
Politics or drama, and yet here we are finding ourselves in the middle of a little bit of both.
A lot of both.
I want to ask you about a lot. That's an interesting remark that you make, a lot of politics right now, and it sounds like you want to tone some of that down. So we'll get into the Hancock side in a moment. But I asked the question about Sam Page because some prosecutors would say public corruption investigations are usually left to the feds. Let them do their thing. But in Missouri, you do have this special eject button, the quo warranto, the Latin phrase. I don't know why lawyers always have to use Latin to sound smart. But you have this power. Is that power that you're comfortable using?
That would be a case-by-case basis, Mark. At this point, I have no intention of moving forward on any quo warranto in the future or anything that I plan on doing. As far as Dennis Hancock, I will say that one is currently pending. Our office is looking at it very, very closely, so I can't comment on what is going on with that case.
I see.
But this will not be an office that is focused on any kind of politics.
It stood out to me that your office has already dropped the charges against the clerk, Ms. Diane Valenti, but has not dropped the quo warranto proceedings. I didn't know, you're telling us now that you're still looking at that. It signaled that maybe the quo warranto is something that you would proceed with. Did Wesley Bell put you in that position when he went public with all these documents that now it's out there and there's some feeling in the office that you have to proceed with it?
Well, first of all, Wesley Bell did bring the quo warranto. There is no feeling or no pressure that I have to proceed with it. I will look at it independently of whatever Wesley Bell did. I don't feel pressure either way in terms of that.
We all saw that he hired his stepdaughter. That's a clear-cut violation of the Constitution. And the Constitution prescribes, as I read it, I think just one punishment for that. Do you see it any differently, or is there anything about the prescribed prosecutorial path there that, or is because he retracted so quickly and said, oops, does that factor into your decision?
Well, as I said, Mark, and I really appreciate your question, this is a pending matter in our office, and I'm not going to comment on it.
Yeah. The only reason why I ask is because, you know, it wasn't too long ago that the feds did come here and Steve Stenger is no longer the county executive. I wonder about the message it might send the public if the incoming prosecutor said, when it comes to nepotism, we can look the other way.
Well, first of all, I will tell you, I'm not going to comment on that case, but I will tell you this. We currently have hundreds of cases under review that have been given no attention yet. We have thousands of pending cases. That is what our office's goal is, to focus on those. Whatever happens with the Dennis Hancock matter after review will happen. But we are going to focus on the thousands of pending criminal cases that we currently have.
Can you give us any clearer idea how you see that question of nepotism? I mean, it would be improper to hire your relative for a government job that other people weren't given the chance to apply for. There's a reason why it's in the Constitution. Does he get special treatment because he's an elected official?
I so appreciate your enthusiasm. I am not going to comment on...
What's your timeline then to make a decision like this? Because
the Dennis Hancock matter. I'm sorry, what?
What's your timeline then to review and make a decision like this? Because, I mean, the public has seen and digested the facts of what has happened. Unless we're missing something else that maybe you're still reviewing, how much time do you need to review that?
What is my timeline when I have to make a decision by? There's no timeline. There is discussion about the case going on. The case is currently pending in the office, as you know.
It is very interesting. A lot of people that see all this politics happening as you take the position, and staffers like the clerk are getting dragged into it. I imagine people here might be wondering, am I next? Am I going to be a casualty in this transition? Will there be a purge of Wesley Bell staffers?
There's not going to be a purge of anyone. We have an incredibly strong staff here of prosecutors, support staff, investigators, and victim advocates. There's no purge going to occur. Like I said, we are all working together with the same goal, to make St. Louis County safer. We have previous people who have worked here before who have called me and want to come back. There's no purge. There's only going to be a growth in this office. Interesting. And that again, will be more manpower, more cost. We'll set the budget questions aside for a later interview. Sure. One other thing that developed started here in this grand jury room during this investigation into Diane Valenti and into the Dennis Hancock situation. A document was published that included the name of the grand jury foreperson. Have you seen that? Do you know what I'm talking about? I heard about that.
Is that concerning to you?
Well, it's extremely concerning. Nothing should ever be leaked out of the grand jury. That is completely unacceptable and illegal. So yes, it's illegal. It's extremely concerning.
What law does it violate?
Actually, I can't list a specific law that it violates. It is extremely concerning if an indictment or anything is leaked out of a grand jury.
And that's because?
Grand jury is a private proceeding. It is a closed-door proceeding.
The name of the person in the grand jury being published could put a target on that person's back. If that same grand jury had handed down murder charges or recommended murder charges, if that involved a gang, I mean, it's not too far-fetched to think that that person's identity being published could put them at real risk.
Which is why it's completely unacceptable that anything should ever be leaked out of a grand jury. I'm agreeing with you.
What can you do about it?
Well, I have no idea where that leak came from. I'd like to find out where the leak came from. Questions are obviously being asked to determine that. That is a huge violation and a concern for that foreperson who you said name was clearly on the document that was
Those names are usually redacted when they go public. Well, I say public. When they go to the court, I think they're already redacted before they even leave this room. The reason I asked this, the last time we talked to Wesley Bell, just as he was about to swear the oath of office and become inaugurated as a member of Congress, he said that he thought crimes had been committed, perhaps, and if he had more time in this office, that would be the first thing on his priority list, would be to go after and investigate how that grand jury foreperson's name was published. It sounds like you agree to some extent.
Oh, I definitely agree. I definitely agree. We have a lot of things on our priority list, and that is one of them. We cannot tolerate leaks from our grand jury or putting anyone at risk, in particular, any grand juror.
And if you find that some person under your employ
had leaked a grand jury document, well, they'll be terminated immediately. It's not acceptable.
I wonder, you're coming into this position with just 2 years left in the term, then there's an election. Have you already decided what you're going to be doing that November of 2026?
Well, I will run for election for this position. I know I have stressed repeatedly that I'm not a politician, and I know running for an election is politics. I will be running for this seat in 2 years as a prosecutor, and I am confident that I will win this seat based upon my track record, what I've done in these 2 years as a prosecutor. St. Louis County needs a prosecutor. They don't need another politician.
I suppose there are some, and I've met some prosecutors who say, I'm by the book, I'm just going to do the same old thing, this system works. There are others who see society shifting and changing. More carjackings, more teen gun violence. And they think we have to adapt and change with the times, to change our tools or our techniques to better get at that problem. Which are you of those two examples, and how will you confront some of those trickier issues, the societal issues that have so many kids trying to seek fame on TikTok or Instagram or just within their social circle, that they would take a gun and go point it at someone and take their car and ditch it on the road somewhere?
That is part of getting a strong office that is working in close partnership with law enforcement, focusing on the violent offenders, focusing on the gun crimes. We have got to get these kids who are on the streets with these guns, which just leads to more and more crime. We have got to focus on those. My philosophy, Mark, I grew up in St. Louis County. I raised my kids in St. Louis County. I want my kids to want to raise their kids here, but they're not going to want to unless St. Louis County is strong. So I, in partnership with my entire dedicated office, we need to make St. Louis County safer again. And part of that is I need to work closely with Gabe Gore in the city. These violent offenders who commit these crimes, they don't see imaginary lines. These are the same offenders who are committing the crimes in the county, in the city. We need to work closely in partnership and share our philosophies to make the entire region safer.
There's a lot of talk politically in Jefferson City about the use of the death penalty in Missouri. Missouri is one state that still has the death penalty. Will you ever pursue it?
Mark, I will tell you, people have asked me my opinion on the death penalty. My opinion on the death penalty doesn't matter. It's the law in the state of Missouri.
Is that true, though? I mean, you could use this office and forcefully advocate against the death penalty in all cases, if you so chose.
I personally do not believe in the death penalty. That doesn't matter. The death penalty is the law in the state of Missouri, and it will have to always be an option in the most heinous and violent murders. It is currently the law in the state of Missouri. I am not a legislator. I don't make the laws. But
they might listen to you. The reason I'm pushing on this is because I wonder, do you see it as, some prosecutors have described prosecuting cases like a poker game. If you have certain cards to play, it helps you leverage, it helps you seal guilty pleas rather. Is that the reason you're answering the question in this way, is that it's a tool in your toolbox? Or
the death penalty, if the death penalty is a deterrent in one heinous murder, then it's worth it.
Well, thank you for your time. I look forward to, we're all hoping that you do well.
Thank you, so much.
A bitter divide inside the St. Louis County government is growing wider. This week, the County Council drafted a proposal to ask voters to give them unique powers to expel County Executive Sam Page or any of his department heads from office. Rita Hurd-Days, a councilwoman, says it would provide checks and balances to the County Council. Other of her members agree, saying that department heads should be accountable to them. Councilman Dennis Hancock says they need some way to make sure Page's department heads show up in the budget process.
The power would simply be to be able to hold department heads, directors, and maybe even the county executive accountable for the things that they have and haven't done.
So what we're trying to do is make sure we have some balance, make sure that we have some accountability in all aspects of county government, and that's what this is designed to do. At the end of the day, the citizens will make the decision.
That's because voters would have to approve any changes to the charter at the ballot box, and if voters do vote in favor of the county's proposal, it would never have to go back before voters again. The council would just have the power to exercise it at will, however often they might choose. That's one reason why County Executive Sam Page called it bad government.
Voters in St. Louis County are going to have to decide what is the role of the county council and what's the role of the county executive. We've had a charter form of government with a county executive and a county council here for a few decades now. And over what we've seen over the past 4 or 5 years is a shift of authority from the county executive to the county council. You know, that's been measured, and we've tried to work through that the best we can. Shifting the ability to fire and hire the county executive midterm, that's a big change. And voters in St. Louis County are going to have to decide, do they want to see that? Do they want to be able to replace and remove the county executive, or do they want to hand that off to the county council? And when you change that dynamic, then you remove the normal checks and balances that you would see in a government.
Seems like they want you to play nice.
Well, we certainly agree on a whole lot of things, and I hope we can talk about some of those things and work on some of those things for sure.
I really don't mean this question to sound glib at all. I actually wonder, this seems like kind of a meat grinder. What about this job is fun for you?
Well, we've accomplished a great deal. I really do and really am proud of our investment in public safety. We have 2 new police stations and a 3rd one coming online. Twice since I've been involved in county government, we've gotten significant raises to our police officers. We've reorganized county government. We've made it much more efficient. We made a big investment in the health department. There's a lot of good things going on in St. Louis County. Our comprehensive planning process is really a big deal. Thinking about our zoning and planning regulations, just making it easier to do business in St. Louis County. Those are exciting things. I think they're worthwhile. The things that go well are not going to get reported very often. To be fair, controversy gets attention, and things that are going smoothly does not draw attention.
Another clash in the county government stems from a pending case on whether or not to expel Dennis Hancock. Sam Page says that decision is now up to the new prosecutor. What is your expectation of the new prosecutor as it pertains to this pending quo warranto to push to expel Dennis Hancock?
Well, the quo is the prosecuting attorney's discretion, whether or not to pursue that. I believe nepotism is wrong. I believe most people in our state believe nepotism is wrong. I believe covering it up is wrong. That certainly is an area of conflict with the council, but I hope we can agree to disagree on that, leave it up to the prosecuting attorney, and continue to work on all of our areas of agreement.
When Dana Red Wing recorded that phone call with Dennis Hancock, was she acting alone, or did you put her up to it?
I didn't know what she was doing. I knew there was a problem and she was going to address it. But that's something that she did most likely for her own protection. From you would have to ask her, but I suspect she had some concern about whether the conversation would be accurately remembered.
Were you surprised to see the prosecutor drop the charges against the clerk?
Well, I was surprised because I thought they were alarming. I heard the presentation of Wesley Bell when he was prosecutor, and it was a very compelling presentation, but that's the authority of the prosecuting attorney to make that decision.
This week, Illinois kicked off its 104th General Assembly, a new year with inaugural ceremonies at the state capitol. It may be a new year, even a new chamber in the Senate, but the political power dynamics in Illinois, they're the exact same. Democrats didn't lose a single seat in either chamber in November's election, outnumbering Republicans by a large number. Downstate leaders like Republican State Senator Erica Harris say that despite that broad partisan divide, she hopes she can work together with lawmakers in both parties.
Well, the reality is there's 59 senators, and we all serve districts based on population. So just by that data alone, there certainly are less representatives in downstate than there would be in the Chicago area, which is why it's really very important for the downstate legislators to have relationships with each other no matter what side of the aisle we're on, so that we can have a bigger impact for downstate and have a voice there.
If you ask Harris the thing that Southern Illinois needs more than anything else right now, she says it's relief from inflation. During the post-game press conference after all the inaugural ceremonies there, Democratic Governor J.B. Pritzker focused a lot of his attention on ways Illinois might fight back against an incoming president-elect, Donald Trump.
We're trying to prepare ourselves for, what we cannot know that he will do on day one. And remember that this president-elect is known for pronouncing things and then never following through. He's also known for not pronouncing anything and then foisting it upon people without any warning. So it's very difficult to predict. Just because he says something on the campaign trail doesn't mean he's going to follow through on it. I'm worried about health care. I think that he is, and his Office of Government Efficiency, and the people who were unelected and are just large contributors, making decisions about Medicaid, not officially going back on Obamacare, but changing the rules around Medicaid so that people would get excluded, and we might have hundreds of thousands of people who would go without health care. So we're worried about that. He's so unpredictable. And I know that the people who supported him think that he's pronounced everything and he's going to follow through on everything, but that wasn't the case when he was president last time. I'm not suggesting he's not going to follow through. My biggest worry are the things he hasn't told us about.
On the very same day as Illinois was swearing its new members in, Missouri's 2025 legislative session also kicked off. New lawmakers were sworn in Jefferson City, and Republicans picked a new Speaker of the House. State Representative Justin Sparks threw his hat into the ring, hoping to beat out Representative John Patterson, who was in line for the role. Patterson won easily. Sparks only got 10 votes. A big item on the to-do list this year, the recent passage of the abortion amendment. Now, House Speaker John Patterson, well, he's previously said the legislature should respect the will of the voters. Mayor Tashara Jones is racking up a lot of frequent flyer miles. A new report in the St. Louis Business Journal tracked the mayor's travel logs and found she was out of town 34 days in 2021, then 41 days in 2022, 49 days in 2023, and through the month of November last year, it had racked up to 39 days. Joining us now is Jacob Kern, the intrepid reporter who put all this together. Jacob, good to have you with us.
Thanks for having me.
Your maiden voyage with us here on the record.
Yeah.
A lot of people who might want to peek behind the scenes would want to know just how long did it take you to put the pieces of a puzzle like this together? This is no small task.
It took a few months, and it kind of started because a few months ago, I think you're probably familiar too, that we have had many more exits, corporate exits downtown than entrance. And what happened was that there was a big one. There was Fleischman Hillard, the giant PR firm, that was yet another one that was deciding to move to Clayton. And when that happened, I felt like that was a pretty big event for St. Louis. So we were putting an article together, and I asked if the mayor would talk about it. I thought that was a fair thing to do. And what her office told me that day was that she would not, because she was in Mexico City. And that got us thinking, how often is the mayor gone?
And you got some answers to that. We ran through the list of days. Some of those were on trips that would last a week. Some were just for a quick day there and back. It kind of varied in your article, which folks can go online and look at and see all the different places and some of the reasonings for. But I wonder, before we get into the meat of the story, on the process. We do a lot of looking at public records and using the Sunshine Law to get after those public records. Did you run into any obstacles trying to put this together?
Well, it's interesting because there are supposed to be travel reports that are put together for when the mayor is traveling, I think some other officials too, and they're supposed to fill out these reports, but they're actually not so easy to get. You have to go to the registrar, then I had to file a Sunshine request, then I had to pay fees to get them. And
can you say how much?
Oh,
maybe that's also a public record?
Not that much, but
a nominal
$30
fee.
or $40, something like that. And
we call that a transparency tax over here.
Okay, yes. Yeah. And what they're supposed to put on there, and they do, is who's paying for these things. So in Tashara Jones's case, there were outside groups that were paying for quite a few of these trips, including an abortion PAC in Washington, D.C., her alma mater, Hampton University in Virginia. There were other groups too. And I think what's interesting about it being a little bit difficult to get those records is that if you wanted to see who is paying for Tashara Jones's sometimes often multiple trips per month, it would be very difficult in real time.
And she did react to your story going to Facebook with a post saying that very little of this travel, if any at all, was paid for by government funds. She said that all of her personal travel, all of her government travel, she paid for with her own money, I think she said, and that 24/7 she's on the job with no paid time off. How did you assess the mayor's reaction to your story?
Well, I wish she would have talked to us, but I understand that she didn't want to. In terms of what she was saying, it's a little bit more nuanced, I think, than the claims that she was making in terms of paying for it all. Like I said, outside groups paid for some. There was city money that was at the mayor's office that paid for a trip to Kansas City. SLDC, the development corporation, paid for Tashara Jones to go to Las Vegas twice for something called the International Council of Shopping Centers event. She was at one of those for 6 days in Las Vegas for that event.
I wonder how, you touch on this in your story, and again, folks should go read it, but how does the travel pattern here compare to past mayors in St. Louis? And did you see any comparison to other modern mayors in other cities about how this might rank?
I think that it would be good to look at other mayors that are in peer cities. There was a remark from a very long time chief of staff, Jeff Rainford, for Mayor Slay, who felt that it would be extremely unlikely to find a chief executive for somebody who is with a city of this size who's going this often. But we did look at the past mayors, and I think have a pretty comprehensive look at mayors in modern memory. Lyda Krewson was a little bit more than 4 times a year. Mayor Slay was less than that. We talked to Freeman Bosley, who served in the 90s. He said he really tried to leave as infrequently as he possibly could because of the operational duties of the mayor's office.
That's an interesting thing about an executive position. Very few other jobs come without a job description. And an executive can define and imagine any job description they want, really. Is the job of mayor to go out of town and bring business here? Is it to dig into the operations and go out alongside the snowplows and help them in their job? Just how hands-on or just how out and about you'd like to be, I guess, is really up to you and then eventually up to the people. How did you assess her claims that in going out there, she was able to bring more funding back or create new opportunities, open new doors? Did any of that seem to ring true as you were reporting this story?
Some of it did, and so they gave us, I'll give all credit to the mayor's office, they answered our questions. She didn't interview with us, but she did answer our questions. And they gave us a 6-page list of over $1 billion in grants. Some of them really, when digging through it, it did appear to be new. There were some solar grants, there were grants going to nonprofits that they said that they were involved in. But there were some problems too. They were citing different grants. There was a lead grant from HUD. There was grants going to Slate, the jobs agency, where past administrations had gotten exactly the same grants.
So there's no evidence of any increase in funding, and it had predated, so that money might have already come in with or without her travel.
Yeah, well, another, we also wanted really specific information as to, well, which relationship alerted you to which opportunity and which application, and we just didn't get that kind of information. They also cited the $500 million ARPA funding that the city got. The problem with that was that the formula was put together and revealed by the federal government under Mayor Krewson, not under Tashara Jones.
I wish we had a running list of how many politicians have taken credit for that $500 million of ARPA funding.
It's a lot of money.
We don't have time for all that. A lot of the trips that you list here, and some of those that you've already mentioned here, they do include real agenda items of actual government work and learning and things that seems quite substantive. Did any of the trips that you reviewed look more personal in nature, or did you leave personal trips out of your examination?
I didn't. I didn't include personal. There were, to say work 24/7, that could very well be true when she's on the job, but there were plenty of vacation week signifiers in the calendar. I mean, not
other than these trips.
Yes. So this trip total, in terms of 12% of the time in office, 160 plus days, it does not include personal vacations for the mayor.
Part of the reason this was interesting is that I learned something reading. I learned a lot of things reading your story. One of the things I learned was that previous Board of Aldermen president, interim president, Joe Vollmer, said, look, if the mayor's absent, there's a clause that says that the Board of Aldermen president may have to step in. Now, absent is defined by, maybe unable to do the job if someone's out of capacity or in the hospital or something. But he wanted to know when the mayor was gone, you reported, because he might have to step in, and he wanted to be aware, where's the mayor?
Yeah, there seemed to be kind of a dispute as to what the city charter means. And one of the former mayors, Vince Schamel, and Joe Vollmer seemed to both be of the mind that absent means absent. So if you're gone from the city, what they interpret the charter to mean is that the powers of the mayor fall to the Board of Aldermen president. And what Vince told me is that years ago, when he was away from the city, the Board of Aldermen president at the time actually reversed government layoffs that Vince Schamel had put into place. So Vollmer, understanding this, wanted to be told when Tashara Jones was gone, and he said that he was not, mostly.
Perhaps an interesting marker to watch for in any future administrations, should there be a more adversarial relationship between the Board of Aldermen president and the mayor of St. Louis. But
could be.
Jacob Kern, thank you for your reporting and for joining us here on The Record to talk about it. We look forward to the coverage that comes next. I did notice, I didn't see any quotes from any of the candidates running for mayor in here. Might you?
No, we felt that mostly that the people who had experience in that office made sense for this article.
Makes sense. Perhaps they will be chiming in with reaction to that story very soon.
Could be.
Jacob Kern, thanks for joining us. America said goodbye to a president this week. Thousands of mourners and 5 presidents gathered at the National Cathedral to honor the memory of Jimmy Carter. And eulogies at funerals like this are tough. How do you sum up the life of a person in just a few words? It's no easy feat, especially for a president. But a few of his own words sum up his aim in life, so let's check the record. In Oslo, Nobel Peace Prize winner Jimmy Carter told us the bond of our common humanity is stronger than the divisiveness of our fears and prejudices. He had that mild-mannered touch of a minister that would calmly call on your conscience to do what you already knew in your heart was right. And he spoke often about how that conscience guided him, too. Carter wrote, "I have one life and one chance to make it count for something. My faith demands that I do whatever I can, wherever I am, whenever I can, for as long as I can, with whatever I have to try to make a difference." But it wasn't just determination that drove Jimmy Carter. He could diagnose, denounce, and disparage dangers to democracy with dagger-like delivery. And he did just that after the Supreme Court ruled money was speech, and corporations could speak just as freely as people in Citizens United. Carter said, quote, "I think the most stupid decision that the Supreme Court ever made, and one of the most damaging, was to rule that corporations are people and that major corporations now can give unlimited supplies of money to candidates." Carter called it the, quote, "erroneous ruling of the Supreme Court where millionaires, billionaires can put in unlimited amounts of money, give legal bribery the chance to prevail," he said. Jimmy Carter called our campaign finance laws a, quote, "complete subversion of our political system." He said it's one that violates the essence of what made America a great country in its political system, and now it's just an oligarchy with unlimited political bribery, he said. Then he told us a quick story. He said, "You know how much I raised to run against Gerald Ford? $0. You know how much I raised to run against Ronald Reagan? $0. You know how much will be raised this year by all presidential, Senate, and House campaigns? $6 billion. That's 6,000 millions." Come to think of it, this country hasn't always taken advice from our leaders. We didn't heed Washington's warnings about bitter partisan divides. We didn't listen much to Eisenhower's warnings about a military-industrial complex. The list goes on. It makes you wonder, if we ignore Carter's words, will we ever see another president like him? Or like Harry Truman? Men of means, they weren't. But men who meant something, they were without a doubt. And that will last much longer than whatever modest amounts of money they might have left behind. That's all our time this week. Next week, we recap the inauguration of Governor Mike Kehoe. Until then, we're off the record.